Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marie Herman, and I'm the owner of MRH Enterprises LLC. I am so glad you could join me today for this very special Executive Secretary Magazine admin chat. Today, I'm going to be talking about negotiation skills, which are a critical skill set that every administrative professional should have. Whether you need to negotiate your next job offer, an upcoming promotion, a contract with a vendor, or something else entirely, you should always be prepared for a negotiation to happen. And in order for that to work best, you need preparation in advance. So today, I'm going to walk you through the steps involved in a good negotiation practice. We're going to start by discussing why you don't negotiate. Why don't a lot of people choose to negotiate? Then I'm going to talk about why you should negotiate. We're going to look at the timing involved in most negotiations. We'll also talk about how to start, how to put yourself in a position of power, some of the elements you should be considering as part of the negotiation process, what your available options are, and some of the key factors to success, the do's and don'ts that you should be considering. So why don't you negotiate? Well, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons, but I think oftentimes there's one primary underlying reason that deters most people, and that is fear. Most people are secretly afraid that the company will rescind the job offer if they're too demanding. Some might say that women in particular don't negotiate for fear of being labeled greedy or having people not like them. Some people just simply don't know where to start or how to negotiate. So when that happens, they need to be prepared for the worst case scenario. It's true, it's possible. Maybe they will rescind the job offer. Maybe they will say, man, you're greedy. But maybe they won't. And you'll never know unless you start that negotiation process. You've got to start somewhere. I think when we look at history, very often men are taught from childhood to negotiate. If you look at the games that they play, the cops and robbers, the cowboys and Indians, the war with cards, even, everything comes down to a negotiation strategy. I give up this, you give up that, we meet somewhere in the middle. It's baked into many of the games that they play. With women, on the other hand, they are often taught to share, to be nice, to be satisfied with what they have, to not make waves. And so we have not always been taught to be assertive in what we need. And negotiating is a step in being assertive. So I'm going to encourage you to take a deep breath, square up your shoulders, and let's get this done. Get out there and negotiate. So why should you? What does it matter? Well, the first and most obvious benefit is certainly financial. If we look at a job offer as an example for a negotiation, if you think back to your very first job, if you had negotiated a starting salary of a certain amount, let's say $30,000 versus $25,000, that initial dollar amount will be the base for much of your future salary history. Most raises and job offers and deposits for our retirement funds, matches from companies, are based upon a percentage of salary versus a flat dollar amount for everyone. So every monetary increase becomes exponentially more significant over the 40 plus years of your career. If you averaged out all of your annual salary increases over the last decade or so, what would it work out to? Maybe 3 to 5% increase a year for most people, and probably not even that much, quite honestly. Well, let's take a look at that in the numbers. After 10 years, with a 3% annual increase, the person who started out with $25,000 would now be making $33,597.91. The person who negotiated up to $30,000 at that same point would be making $40,317.49 after 10 years. That's a big difference. And that's a relatively modest 3% increase. That's not a crazy amount of money to look for every year, even though we might not get that much. But on the other hand, what if we went with a slightly more aggressive 5% increase? Well, that would bring the person who started with $25,000 up to $40,722. But the person who started at $30,000 would end up at $48,866. So your choices cumulatively mean that 10 years from now, you could be earning $8,000 more or $23,000 more than you are right at this minute. And that's not even taking job changes into account, where you have an additional opportunity to increase your salary or promotions. How many of you believe that your percentage increase is based solely on how well you do your job? Probably not most of you. Most of the time we know it's based on other factors. It could be the boss's whims, it could be the economy, it could be the dollars our companies are bringing in, it could be the budget, it could be where you rank against other employees. It's worth it to figure out how to negotiate at the higher end versus the lower end of that range. Take the time now to figure out what you need to do differently to negotiate at that higher range. So, what are some other reasons that you might want to negotiate? I mean, money is a great thing, but it's not the only thing. Training is another great reason to develop your negotiation skills. One of the most common perks to negotiate is training opportunities. Sometimes if a company cannot give on the dollars, they can give on the training. And so better negotiation skills result in enhanced professional development. And those improved skills and that additional professional development lead to additional negotiations and future performance reviews and job offers to justify higher than average salary increases. We've probably all negotiated something related to our career. I hope, anyway. What did you do? How did you feel about yourself afterwards? How did your boss feel about you? You probably found that your self-confidence increased every time you successfully negotiated an issue. You were demonstrating this quality to your boss just by virtue of engaging in the negotiation process. And you reinforce to the company that you value your skills and you expect them to value your skills, all of which enhances your credibility. So negotiation leads to increased job satisfaction over time because we have gotten the best deal for ourselves and we feel vested in our success. It's definitely worth doing. Now, timing is everything when it comes to negotiation. You don't want to let yourself get screened out too early, and you don't want to attempt to negotiate too early in the interview process. You do want to start with the deal breakers. Imagine this. Scenario number 1. Huge pile of resumes. Huge. Do you think that HR person is going through and saying, "Oh, a grammar mistake. But look, what a cute font they used. I'll keep that one. Oh, pink paper and perfume. Well, that's a keeper. Oh, no legal experience for this job that requires legal experience. Well, I'm sure they'll learn fast. That's a keeper. Oh, salary. Too high. Well, we can probably increase our range. That's a keeper too." Do you think that's what they're doing? I can pretty much guarantee you it isn't. What's happening is much more likely to be scenario number 2. Same huge pile of resumes. Grammar mistake. Forget it. Pink paper. Forget it. No legal experience. Forget it. Salary too high. Forget it. That's what's happening. They are looking for reasons to screen you out. If you have a pile of 500 resumes that you've received for one job, you are not going to go looking at every one of those resumes hoping to find a reason to keep all of those people. Of course not. You're going to be looking for reasons to eliminate as many as you can. So I'm going to repeat that. Companies are looking for reasons to screen out resumes. They are not looking for reasons to save them. Clearly, salary is a potential factor that companies could use to screen you out. So don't get yourself screened out before you interview. Try to avoid putting your salary in the cover letter. And if they say it's required, well, obviously you have to include it, but I would certainly be asking about why that company is requiring it. I happen to live in the state of Illinois in the United States, and I'm very happy to say that our state this year passed a new law that said you cannot ask for salary history. It's no longer allowed. I am hoping and praying that that law spreads itself out into across my country and across all the countries of the world, because you shouldn't base your current salary offer for the current position, which might have way more responsibilities than prior jobs or completely different job responsibilities. It shouldn't be based on what you made in the past. You might have been underpaid in the past. It should be based on the requirements for that job. So I say hallelujah to that, and I hope that more states and countries follow and prevent companies from asking for salary history, because really, it's none of their business. They don't need to know what you made in the past. When I talk about not screening yourself out too early, what I'm saying is don't demand a certain dollar amount as soon as you sit down. The same philosophy applies for interviews as for resumes. You might have 5 people for one job. Are they looking for a reason to fall in love with 5 people? Or are they looking for a reason to eliminate 4 people and the person who's left gets the job? Don't put yourself in the position of being eliminated too early. And I know sometimes we want to do that because we think, well, if they can't meet my salary, I'd rather know up front and not waste my time or their time. I get that. I know. I understand it. But salary can be very fluid. And for the right employee, companies have been known to bend their plans to change them a bit to get the salary up if they need to bring in someone good. So don't be too quick to rule yourself out or to rule out a job you think might not quite be at your salary requirements. There might be some flexibility in it. For the deal breakers, think before you apply for a job first. If it calls for working in an area that you don't want to work in, if it is doing tasks that you hate doing, then don't apply for that job, of course. But sometimes we don't find out about the deal breakers until we're farther along in the process. And so what I would encourage you to do is to not start with your insistence on a packet of green M&Ms on your desk every morning. That's just crazy. You got to kind of ease into it with your deal breakers. So first, learn about the job, learn about what's involved before you decide whether or not there's deal breakers. But know ahead of time, before you start any negotiation, what your deal breakers are. So, how do you start a negotiation process? And this is not just for jobs, this is any negotiation process. Are you willing to walk away? Force yourself to consider the worst case scenario and how you will feel if it occurs. But be realistic. How likely is it to happen? If you're willing to walk away, then you don't have any fear. And when you don't have fear, you're in a much stronger negotiation position. If you're in desperate financial circumstances, you might need to significantly lower your standards. You may have to take whatever job comes along. You may have to do whatever you need to do because you may not have another choice. But in the course of an ordinary job change, you can afford to practice your negotiation skills. Let the company be the first to suggest a salary, if at all possible. If you're asked what your salary requirements are, provide a range and indicate that it's flexible depending on the opportunities and the benefits offered by the position. Don't issue ultimatums. I'm going to talk more about this in a little bit, but the process is a give and take. It's not a dictatorship. Ultimatums are a lose-lose proposition. They make you look demanding, and the employer resents feeling backed into a corner. Try to leave your requests open-ended rather than implying take it or leave it, especially if the item you're negotiating is a nice to have, but not a deal breaker. You need to be prepared to walk away on the deal breakers, but you don't want to walk away on a minor issue that doesn't really matter to you, just because your pride won't let you back down. Most of all, you have to ask for what you want. The employer or the vendor is not a mind reader. At this time, they don't know what is important to you or what your ultimate goals are. So it's your responsibility to ask for what you want, to let them know what your needs are. Whenever possible, you want to try to negotiate from a position of power. That means you start by researching your facts. You have to be confident in the value that you bring to the situation. And you need to be able to convey that value calmly and without emotion. Well, except maybe that passion of your convictions. You don't want to be whining or begging or otherwise emotional. Don't over rationalize or over justify. Begin by asking for what you want. You don't have to immediately expand on the rationale, but you should be prepared to do so if needed. Your negotiation will be most successful when you negotiate from that position of power. So research your facts prior to entering the negotiation. If it's a job interview, you're going to check salary calculators on the internet. You're going to review brochures from local staffing services. You're going to check with the library on the ongoing current salaries for local employers. And generally, you're going to do as much as you can to become fully informed on what is considered average, what the lowest levels are, what the highest levels are. Investigate the factors behind the average salary as well. How many years of experience? How high of a degree? Was the average employee certified? Find out all the details that you can. Every area that you exceed is an area to enhance your negotiation position. Your ability to sell yourself during an interview or a performance review will make an enormous difference in the results. You've got to be able to sell yourself. Some of the factors to consider when it comes to a job offer. Whether it's true or not, there's some companies that seem to think anyone can do our jobs, but we know that's not true. Fortunately, there's many companies that know the value of their administrative staff. So the questions you should be looking at, the factors you should be considering with any job offer, with any potential promotion. Look at the market. Is it an employer's market or a job seeker's market? Is there an excess of qualified candidates with similar skills? Are there a lot of new employers in the area, which is increasing the demand for quality candidates? Look at the company. Every company has their own internal pay scale and unique benefits and personal rules. The company may pride itself on paying its employees top dollar, or they may be experiencing economic challenges. Look at the position title. Generally speaking, an executive assistant would make more money than an administrative assistant, who would make more money than a receptionist. A PA internationally might make more money than an executive assistant, depending on the company. Look at the existing salary range. Certain positions may be locked into certain salary ranges, especially public positions such as government, school districts, or union shops, for example. There may be no flexibility within that organization to move outside those ranges when there's contracts involved. Look at the company and the executive's need. Just how badly does the company or the boss need to fill this position? And just how much does the company or the boss want you to fill this position? How much authority does this individual have in the hiring process? Look at the geography. Looking at a rural company, you're probably not going to make the same wages that you might in a downtown urban area. Look at the competition. How replaceable are you? The more specialized your skills and the greater inside knowledge of the company or the industry or the position that you have, the better leverage you have in the negotiation process. And then finally, look at you. Your skills, experience, education, certifications, salary history, and myriad other unique to you factors go into the salary offer that they make. And that's why two individuals working in the same position, performing the same tasks, may end up at different starting salaries. One may have additional years of experience or a degree, or simply better negotiating skills and a better ability to sell themselves to the company. Listen to what they have to offer and ask for further information, like their benefits and their tuition policies or whatever else is important to you. You don't have to accept their first offer, and you don't have to accept immediately. Now, you might be thinking, that offer is an insult. I can't believe you would have the nerve to even ask me to consider it. What kind of morons are running your company anyway? Take this job and shove it. You can kiss my butt. Well, those are not the words that should come out of your mouth. Instead, how about Thank you for offering me the position. I'm so excited about working for XYZ Company. I'd like to take the weekend to review the terms. Can I let you know my answer on Monday? If it's less than they had indicated they were offering, or substantially less than you were anticipating, it's reasonable to say, I'm a little disappointed in this salary. As you know, I had indicated I was looking for ABC XYZ dollars. Is there any flexibility in that dollar amount? Have you ever negotiated something and had it disappear? Well, get it in writing. Now, of course, a guarantee with an unethical company is not a guarantee, but you still have a better chance of actually having the terms that you agreed to come through when everything is in writing. Verbal agreements are very, very dangerous, and they often don't stand up in court. If you get an offer, make sure every portion of that offer gets put in the writing. If anything is left out, make sure that you have them revise that package so that you actually get everything that you requested. Don't try to go back afterwards and say, but, we agreed to this. Well, if it's not in writing in the contract, sorry, it doesn't matter. And then take some time to consider the whole package. And one of the things that I always encourage people to do with jobs in particular is to really think about what the whole package means. That's things that are intangible as well. It's not just how many hours am I going to work a week and how much money am I going to get paid for those hours. Yes, that's a huge thing to consider, and there's a certain baseline that all of us need. But much of it, once you get beyond that baseline, comes down to personal factors. How much do I like my boss? How do I like the coworkers? How bad is the commute? What are the responsibilities like? Am I going to be challenged in this job? Will I be able to grow with this company? Those kinds of qualities are beyond what's in the actual job offer, but they're what make or break the job long term for us. So really think about when you're negotiating, what are the factors that are most important to you? What do you really need to have? And how do you get those into your life? When you're looking at your available options, some of the things to consider would be money. People often are ignorant about what they can negotiate in a job offer. They assume the company is making them the best possible offer or looking out for them. In reality, every individual is responsible for their own career path and their own ultimate success. While your company may indeed be looking out for you, that doesn't relieve you of your responsibility for taking care of yourself. So, what are the areas that you actually can negotiate? Well, the first one, of course, that most people think of is money. But money is more than just your salary. Potential areas to explore could be a sign-on bonus. For instance, some healthcare industry positions are paying sign-on bonuses due to the shortage of employees. Performance bonuses would be another area. Although they've fallen somewhat out of favor since the stock bubble burst in the early 2000s, stock options are another area where there might be room for negotiation. Stock options allow you to purchase stock in the future at a set dollar amount, regardless of what price the stock is trading at on a certain date. You might be able to negotiate a severance package, either when you're hired, especially if you're going into a risky situation like a startup company, or when a company is going through mergers and laying off employees. Retention bonuses are something you can discuss with your employer. That's where they pay you to work until a certain date. There's other areas you can look at as well when it comes to negotiating. Benefits, your insurance, 401k match, other types of retirement benefits. Review time. Maybe you make an arrangement that you're going to be reviewed after 90 days on the job with a revisit of your salary. That might allow you to come in slightly lower than you're comfortable with, but with the understanding that after you've proved yourself, your salary will be increased. Make sure you get that in writing. Training. What training are they going to allow you to take or encourage you to take? What are they supporting financially? Vacation time. There might be some flexibility with that, especially if you're coming from a company where you've been there long enough to have accumulated a high vacation time. Tuition reimbursement. Other perks. These are just some. Company car, cell phone, home internet access, housekeeper, relocation expenses, stock options, COBRA expenses, health club membership, commuting allowance, parking, flex time, IAAP membership, or membership in some other organization, convention attendance, reduced work weeks. All of these could be possible perks that could be negotiated. Does it mean you'll get everything? No. Does it mean you might get some of them? Absolutely, you might. You'll never know if you don't ask. And you may say, wait, what? Who's going to pay for some of these things? I've negotiated almost all of these in my career, including at one time, and I know the one you probably latched onto was that housekeeper one. Wait, what? How did you get a housekeeper? Well, I will tell you. I worked from home. I was telecommuting. And I told them if I was in the office, you'd have janitorial services in the office, so I should have a housekeeper paid for at home. And they agreed. I got a housekeeper paid for when I was working from home. So you never know unless you ask. Now, I do suggest that you be ready to make trade-offs and you stay focused on your goals. So limit your requirements. Your list should not be a mile long. Use questions to initiate discussions. Can you help me to understand something? And then state your case. Justify requests in terms of fairness, what other companies do. Do be careful with what other employees get, because companies don't like it when employees discuss salary amongst themselves. So be careful with that kind of phrasing. Don't make your future boss feel like a loser. Nobody wants to hire a prima donna. There's some key success factors that you should consider, some do's and don'ts, so to speak. Don't compare yourself to specific individuals. Why does Jane make more money than me? Well, how do you know Jane's salary? Were you snooping in the personnel files? Did she discuss it with you? In many companies, discussing salary with other employees is an offense they can fire you for. Don't talk about how much money you need. Instead, talk about what the position is worth or why your skills justify a higher offer. It is not the company's problem if you can't afford your rent. That's just truth. That's the way it is. It is not the company's problem. However, it is reasonable to say that across the industry, people with my position, my skill set, my level of experience are making this much money. I am underpaid compared to the market. That is reasonable to be able to approach your boss with and to be able to have the numbers to back that up and prove what you are saying. It is not reasonable to talk about the fact that you need the money. I just had a baby, our expenses are getting higher, everyone's expenses are getting higher. It's true, but it's not a reason for a company to increase your salary. And I would also add that we often tend to think in terms of fairness. What's fair? And the marketplace is not always fair. It's a sad truth. We might think that someone who's been with the company 20 years should be paid higher than someone coming in off the street. But in reality, most larger salary increases don't come from annual increases paid at a company, the merit increases. They're from job changes. The marketplace generally jumps ahead of the 3% corporate increases. It's usually much easier to potentially get a 10% pay increase by switching jobs than it is for a company to give you a 10% pay increase. That's just the reality of the job market. And so keep that in mind when you're doing your negotiations, that it's not about being fair sometimes, because that's not necessarily what the company is concerned about. Now, larger companies will often do reviews of job families. If they have a couple hundred administrative staff, they probably have job families where their job descriptions set out by level, and they periodically review the admins to see, are you doing the kind of work that's appropriate for your level? Should you be recategorized into a higher or lower level? And could that impact your salary? That's pretty common in larger companies. Smaller companies are less likely to do that, though. So you really have to be your own advocate. So do know your market value by checking salary surveys. Do that research online, the library, through professional associations, through local staffing services. Do enhance your edge. Keep your education, training, certifications, responsibility, professional association. Do everything you can to stay top of your game. This benefits you no matter what happens. If you stay in this job, it helps you work more efficiently, gives you an edge at performance reviews and promotion time. Excuse me. So if you stay in this job, it helps you to work more efficiently. It gives you an edge at performance review and promotion time. If you move on to another company, the extra skills help your negotiation process and they give you an edge over other candidates. Don't negotiate with the person who can't make the decision. So always know who the decision maker is and bring the right attitude to the table. Your goal should be a win-win for everyone, not a win-lose scenario. Every dollar I win as a company is a dollar the company loses. You can't think that way. You've got to think about what's the best possibility, what's the best outcome for me and for the company. Treat this as a business transaction. Your goal is to come up with mutually acceptable terms. And recognize that this is not a popularity contest. This is not a personal battle. No does not necessarily mean no. No may mean no to your first offer. So try changing the terms. Okay, you won't pay for me to attend a certain conference with registration and travel costs included. Will you cover half the cost? Will you allow me to take it off as professional development time instead of vacation time? Will you cover the registration and I'll cover the travel costs? Or I'll cover the registration and you cover the travel costs? Will you cover it if I can find a roommate? Start with everything that you want and negotiate down, level by level by level, until you find what they are willing to support. Whatever arrangements that you come up with, make sure that they're put in writing. If they don't write it for you, then write them an email or a memo detailing, per our conversation today, you have agreed to, and then spell out the terms of what was agreed to. A final factor to consider in your negotiation: if a company refuses something that's critically important to you and that's beneficial to your long-term professional development, such as the ability to attend seminars, do you really want to work for that company? Sometimes the areas a company will negotiate on are hampered by their desire to treat all employees equally. But other times, their lack of desire to negotiate with you demonstrates how they treat and support their employees, and it should serve as a red flag to you. Only you know if you can be happy at a company that refuses to provide professional development support for its employees. It's really something to think about. There's two basic schools of thought when it comes to negotiation for contracts. Some people say start with the easy stuff first, and that helps to build momentum and create a sense of investment in the process. Other people say start with the hard stuff first and get it out of the way while you're fresh. And that way the rest of the stuff is easy and minor and it flows faster because we got through the worst of it. This stuff, it's just dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Now, which one's the right way? Depends. I can't say that one way is always correct, but it's something to consider before you start which method you want to take. Also, consider partnering. If you're not comfortable playing the hardline bad cop, so to speak, consider partnering up with someone who is. You want someone who's going to ask the hard questions, who will be willing to walk away, who will prevent you from getting caught up in the moment. If you can't do that for yourself, then bring someone with you that will. If you're going in to do a contract negotiation with a hotel, for example, bring someone with who has complementary skills. So if your skill set is that you're really good at the big pictures and kind of envisioning how the event is going to go and how the placement is going to be, but you're not really good with the nitty gritty of the details and paying attention to those attrition clauses and F&B minimums and things like that, bring along someone who has that skill set. And that way you'll be sure that everything is covered in that contract. Do your homework before you start. So again, if you're going in, maybe it's a hotel contract, maybe it's some other kind of contract, make sure you've researched other options, prices, and terms of any contracts. You need to know what's reasonable and what isn't. And you need to know when you actually hear a good offer. The party with more information usually has more leverage. So for example, if you know that the people who put an offer on your house have already sold their own house and that they have to move quickly, that gives you a little leverage and some extra bargaining chips. You might be able to insist on a higher price, particularly if you're willing to allow them to close the deal fast. Sometimes, even personal information about the parties might affect your ability to create a more collaborative atmosphere. Like, hey, I'm racing in that marathon too. Look what we have in common. Laying that kind of a groundwork can help smooth the negotiation process. People like to negotiate with people like them. Be very careful about playing games. Sometimes we want to play games during the negotiation process. We want to imply that there's some other entity waiting in the wings, offering us whatever we are asking for. Well, this is the kind of game that can seriously backfire and lead to ill will among the parties. There's certainly no harm in stating that you're accepting bids from multiple vendors, but saying that someone has offered you something that they haven't, in the hopes that another vendor will match the terms, can definitely cause issues of mistrust. That sort of thing has a way of coming out. Vendors often talk to each other, so you might be surprised at what they can learn about each other. And once that trust is broken, you can't get it back. They will never trust you again. So be very careful about the kinds of games that you play. And in the same way, people that use this as a way to get their company to raise their money, to say, hey, XYZ company has offered me a job with this much money, and I want you to match it. And if they really haven't done that, what happens when your boss says, oh, I'm sorry, we can't match that. What's your last day? You've got to be very, very careful about those kinds of games. They really, truly can backfire. Some negotiations disintegrate because the parties take an all or nothing approach, in which the other party must agree to all of their terms in order to move forward. A good way to move past that kind of a roadblock is to break the negotiations out into sections, kind of create little compartments for each one, and then reach an agreement on each part separately. So that makes it feel like you're reaching a series of solutions and you're making progress rather than battling one huge war. So when you can, when it's appropriate, break out the contract into smaller sections and go through those one at a time instead of approaching it as this giant entity. You also need to be able to separate the emotions from the people. To reach agreement, the negotiating parties have to be able to look beyond to see who or what is the real interest or the real influence that's affecting each party. You have to come up with options to create a problem-solving environment and neutralize conflict. And the way to do that is to stick to objective and easy to justify principles of fairness. So successful negotiators separate the business from the personal and the facts from the feelings. Don't let an unpleasant personality or an unpleasant style drag down the negotiations. And avoid making the negotiations seem personal. Don't use language like I believe or I think. Instead, focus on statements of fact. If we pay this price, both parties to the venture will be at risk. So use factual statements, not those feeling statements. Take control of the negotiation whenever possible. Controlling the logistics, the location, the timing, the topics, the pace of negotiation, what would be called controlling the agenda, could potentially create an advantage for you. Lawyers often think that the attorney who drafts the agreement is in the contractual driver's seat. So by controlling the negotiations, you get to decide what topics are discussed and in what order. Now, sometimes parties will use a passive approach. They might seem to act as the moderator for the negotiations or offer to summarize where things stand. That's one way to do it. But no matter how the reins are seized, whoever frames the issues generally has more control over how those issues are eventually resolved. So keep that in mind as you're approaching a negotiation. Prioritize. Prioritize, prioritize, prioritize. Contract negotiations are typically going to be focused on revenue and risks. But clearly, some revenues and risks are more important than others. When you negotiate, you need to know what your top priorities are. Usually it's going to be the business or the money making that's offered by the deal. And how your other priorities will rank below that is a factor. This will help keep your eyes on the prize and avoid getting bogged down in issues that are not as important to you. So if you're doing a hotel contract and you know that your number one goal is you don't want to have too high of a food and beverage minimum and you don't want to pay a room rental fee. And if you keep your eyes on those two factors, then you can kind of look at the rest of them and be a little looser with them. Well, we're willing uh, to not have this thing that we want, like AV included, so long as these factors that we do want are included. So knowing what your priorities are helps you identify what you can release, what you can let go of with the other party, what you can let them win, so to speak. But the only way you can do that is if you know what your critical elements are. Next, seek to understand. Question rather than demand. If the other party is taking a hard line on certain issues, ask why. Questions open up the discussion. Arguments often close communication down. So try to understand, why is it important to you that we do things this way? Help me to understand that. And be careful that your questions aren't confrontational in nature. It shouldn't be a question thinly disguised where it really is an accusation. You want it to be an attempt at understanding their point of view, an attempt at understanding their priorities. As Stephen Covey would say, it's the seek to be understood and then to understand. And that is a big part of the negotiation process, is that when you look at the underlying emotional facts that are going on, and I know I just told you, leave the emotions out of it. But what I mean is, if you look at what's driving the level of importance for the people you're negotiating with, that can often help you to come up with more creative solutions. Rather than focusing on just the pure facts, you need to at least understand the emotions underlying the negotiation. And if you look at that from the perspective of someone has fear of something happening, fear is a very powerful force, and it can make people dig in their heels and become very insistent upon certain things that they don't really even care about. But it's a symptom of the fear that underlies the conversation. And that's why you should not bring the emotions into the negotiation process. But you should recognize that other people may bring their emotions in. And so seeking to understand those higher levels of what's going on, what's behind your emotion here, what's behind your insistence on this, which on the surface seems out of proportion or unnecessary, that can often help us in the negotiation process. And it allows us to perhaps find new ways of coming up with solutions that satisfy everyone. Because when you recognize that, oh, they're afraid that if we do this, this will happen. If we argue with them on this, they're afraid they're going to lose us as a customer. And so here's how we can reassure them. That would be kind of an example of that process. Understanding what is the fear behind the other party and what can you do to allay those fears. Always acknowledge agreements as you go along. So find points of agreement and end on a positive note. That upbeat approach requires that you find opportunities to say, you're right about that, or I agree. However small these points of agreement might be, they help to set a collaborative tone. If negotiations are spread over a series of meetings, then always try to end every meeting positively. That goes a long way toward establishing that collaborative tone, and it's much more likely to be conducive to progress and result in an ultimate agreement. So as much as you can, always try to step in with something positive, some acknowledgement of, yes, we agree on this. Fantastic. We've made progress on that point. Acknowledge that progress, acknowledge that agreement as you go along. I had mentioned previously ultimatums. If a party resorts to threats, agree to these terms or there's no deal, or if they wage a war of attrition by dragging out the negotiations, you'll have to decide what the deal is really worth to you. If the ultimate prize is so valuable that you're willing to accept the other party's ultimatum or put up with endless haggling, that's fine. And if the other party has all the power, for instance, they're the only known buyer of your product, then you may have to grin and bear it for a while too. If not, however, the best strategy is often to walk away from the negotiations. If the other party really needs you, it may reevaluate its tactics and return to the table. If not, you can move on to more productive negotiations with someone else. Ultimatums are very dangerous. As I said, they can make people feel like they're being coerced. They can definitely have a negative impact upon the negotiation process. While there's nothing wrong with stating a statement of fact that if you are unable to meet the salary, then I will not be able to accept the job. That's a statement of fact. That's not an ultimatum. The ultimatum would be, if you don't raise my salary 25%, I'm going to quit tomorrow. Well, are you prepared to quit tomorrow if they don't raise your salary 25%? And does that mean that there is no negotiation in there where they would maybe come up 20%? And would that be acceptable to you? Ultimatums cut off that process. They really prevent people from coming to a solution that would have worked well for both of them and would have allowed both people to feel like they had won something. A negotiation where one person wins everything and the other person gets nothing is a very uncomfortable negotiation. Nobody wants to feel like they're a fool or they're gullible. They want to feel like they're partners. And you don't give ultimatums to partners. Now, that said, it is appropriate to state the facts. And so if the fact is that this job is important to me, but my family is also important to me, and I will not be able to continue working here unless I'm able to reduce my hours. But it's all in the phrasing with this. So again, you don't go in and insist that your hours get cut 75% so that you can spend more time with your family, but you don't want a corresponding decrease in salary. That's not a negotiation, that's an ultimatum. And so think carefully about how you are phrasing your requests. And are you pushing the other party into a corner where they feel like they have no choice but to dig in their heels and fight back or try to escape from the negotiation because they're backed up into a wall and they're not going to have any room to negotiate at all? People do not like negotiating when they feel trapped. It feels an awful lot like coercion. And so it is very much to your benefit to learn how to phrase your requests. I don't think that we should be so vague that we allow them to completely set the terms of the agreement. So part of being assertive means that we learn how to phrase our requests. That means you can't sound hesitant. You can't sound like, I always think of Piglet from Winnie the Pooh. Oh, dear, do you think maybe you could possibly see your way to considering giving me a little bit of a pay increase, maybe? No. That is not the way we approach a negotiation. You are not Piglet. You have to speak firmly, but you can speak warmly as well. And so it is appropriate to go in and state that I've worked here for this period of time. It has been this long since I've had a raise. I believe that my skill set has improved to the level that I am more efficient in my job and I'm able to get more accomplished than I was even 2 years ago. I also believe that I've taken on additional responsibilities that justify a higher salary. I'd like us to sit down and discuss my salary and see if we can come to some fairer terms. That's a good way to approach your boss. You're going in with facts. You're stating things related to your skill set, your volume of work, your responsibilities that you've taken on, your education you've acquired, your level of knowledge, and your comfort level. and all of these things that can have an impact on how well you do your job. It's not, I want more money because I think Jane makes more money than me. And it's not, do you think you could would you please maybe consider possibly sometime consider giving me a little bit of a pay increase? No, it's a simple statement of fact. And it's an opening conversation. There's no ultimatum. There's no, if you don't give me a raise, I'm going to quit tomorrow. There's none of that. But it's a discussion. It opens the door. And it leaves room for both parties to feel like they are winning something and that it has a good path forward to finish the discussion. And that should be your goal when it comes to negotiation. At the end, everyone should feel good. Make sure that the other side leaves the negotiation feeling like they have made a good deal too. The offers that you make should always leave you enough wiggle room to make acceptable concessions to the other side. The most important trip that you might take in life is meeting people halfway. And that also means that you shouldn't start negotiations by revealing your absolute bottom line. Instead, leave yourself room to negotiate. You'll make the other party feel like they've won something, and you might be surprised to find that the other party is willing to give you more than you would have been willing to accept. Negotiation is extremely powerful. It can help us in so many areas of our life, but the only way that it will work is if we start the negotiation process. We have to get over our fear. We have to speak up. We have to ask for what we need. And that only happens when we open our mouths. So I encourage you to start practicing your negotiation skills. Maybe start small. Negotiate with your spouse where you're going for dinner. Then work up to the big leagues. Go for a job offer. Go for a promotion. Go for a request of having your company pay for you to attend Executive Secretary Live with all travel expenses included. Work up to something like that. You'll be so proud of yourself and so confident in how you approach life when you learn to successfully negotiate. It's an amazing, amazing feeling. And it's a skill set that every administrative professional should have. I hope that you will begin to negotiate your life. Thank you for joining me today. Again, my name is Marie Herman. I'm the owner of MRH Enterprises, LLC. I provide training for administrative professionals. I lead certification study groups for the Certified Administrative Professional exam and the Microsoft Office Specialist certification. If you enjoyed today's presentation, please click like at the bottom of the screen and leave a comment. Tell me what you liked about this presentation and share the link with others. Let them know about Executive Secretary Magazine's Admin Chat series. This is one of the best ways that you can beef up your skills and become better administrative professionals. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you'll tune back in to Executive Secretary Magazine's Admin Chat channel every Thursday when they release new programs. Thanks, everyone.